In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or in Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim ve'et ha'aretz. We're in Genesis. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Lori with the Bible Brief, and we're finally getting to the actual books of the Bible. Now, we just started with a little bit of Hebrew, which is the language the Old Testament was written in, and we're jumping into the beginning, the book of Genesis. Now, before we get into the material itself, let's talk a little bit about the structure and the themes. So when we do jump in, it makes a little bit more sense. So one of the first things that's important, again, is structure. Now, I know you're going to say, Lori, nobody cares about the structure, but it's my favorite part, because it shows us so much about what the author is intending, what the Lord is trying to show us. And they do that through structure. So it's kind of like breadcrumbs that we can follow, or clues that we can follow to kind of build the story. So let's do the structure breadcrumbs together. First, the structure of Genesis seems to fall in two simple parts. The first part, the origins of everything, or the cosmological view, that's chapters 1 through 11, and the second part, 12 through 50. So the second part is more the anthropological view, or the view, creation of humanity and people. So really it's a story in two parts, and that's the structure. But here's why that's so awesome. The story of Genesis is a story about origins. It's a story about the origins of the cosmos and the big picture stuff. And then it's also a story about a family. So it's a story about us and the creation of us and our purpose. And together we see that it's how God is not just a God of one or the other, but God is a God of both. And so the structure shows us the theme that God is the God of our origins, the origins of everything, and they are intimately tied together. So that's the structure. In this first part, we'll only do the first half, really 1 through 11. Now you'll probably be familiar with this. This is where we see the creation, the fall, the days, and all of the stories about like Babylon and these big picture things are all in that first part. It's really taken as a view of prehistory, we call it. We're not really sure when this stuff happened, and that's not the point. The point of the first half is to tell us more about how this all began and tell us a lot about God and what's going on. So that's where we'll jump in. There are a couple of literary techniques that I want to show as we jump into the literature that helps us also make sense. So we've talked about the structure a little bit, in this case a very simple structure, the two parts, two halves. I call it halves, don't be mad at me because it's not exactly even. But we also see an idea of what's called a couplet. A couplet is where you kind of see the story twice. And in the story of Genesis, you're going to see it a lot. You're going to see the story maybe told once, and then you turn the page and bam, there's the story being told again. A couplet. It's almost like it's two sides of the same coin. So you're kind of zooming out, zooming in, and it tells a complete story. There's a great example of a couplet, and it starts right out at the beginning. In the book of Genesis, the creation in the beginning. There are actually two stories of the creation. We'll go through both of them today. One of the purposes of seeing that is that you kind of have a zoom out view and a zoom in view. We're going to see a big picture view and a small picture view. Just like the couplet we talked about in the structure, where you have the first half of Genesis and the second half, we're going to see a couplet in the story of creation itself, a big picture view and then a zoomed in view. Now they're not meant to be like which one's correct, or you're not supposed to make like a Frankenstory and like jam them together. They're different views of the same thing that show us something different themes, different qualities, something different about God. So take them together and enjoy what each one's trying to do. Let's do one together. Let's do the story of the creation. The creation really happens in chapters 1, 2, and 3. The first chapter of Genesis, in the beginning, God created, is the story that you're probably most familiar with. This is the one that starts out with the 7 days, or the 7 creative periods. You'll notice that it has a unique pattern, and the pattern goes something like this. It says, in the beginning, God created. And then it says, and God said. And then it says, and it was evening and morning of the first day. So you see, God said, God created, and then it ends in kind of a day. That's going to tell us something about what we're supposed to learn. Now you can go back and try to figure out how these days fit into astrophysics, but Scripture isn't an astrophysics text. It isn't a history book. It's a scriptural book. And that scriptural book is trying to tell us more about God and our relationship to Him. So when we look at God said, God created, we say He's creating by fiat. He's just saying it, and it comes into purpose. God's in charge. God is being intentional. He's putting order into the universe. And so we say, hey, this story is about a God who creates order, a God who creates purpose and intention. Also, each day, what's up with the days? Now again, you might go back and say, well, it meant this and that, different things. But I think what it's showing is that God is going to set up a pattern. And the pattern of 7 days actually falls in a couplet itself. It falls in the first 3 days, 1, 2, 3, which are paralleled to days 4, 5, and 6. In day 1 of creation, God creates light and dark. He doesn't say sun, moon, and stars. That's day 3. So you see the first parallel with light and dark, and then the second parallel on day 4 with sun, moon, and stars. The second day, he creates sea and sky. So he's kind of separating the waters and creates sea and sky. In the fourth day, the parallel day, he's putting the animals in the sea and in the sky. And then in the last, you get earth and vegetation. And then in the 6th day, you see humans and people populating it. So you see a couplet again, a structure of 3, a structure of 3, and then the 7th day, God rests. God is creating something intentional. He's putting order. So again, we see God says, he said, he speaks it by fiat. He's putting intention and purpose. He's putting order. He's also showing the structure where he is creating something meaningful. And that's what we should get out of that first structure. Now, something really fascinating that happens is when you turn the page and you get to Genesis 2, there's kind of another creation. Yeah, check out Genesis 2 and verse 4. It kind of starts over. And in this case, you see it very differently. In the first version of creation, God creates all of the stuff first and then puts humanity, both humans, male and female, at the same time, at the end. In the second creation, it starts the opposite. God creates humanity, man, Adam, first. You learn his name. You also see some of the other things in a different order. God's going to zoom in. The couplet on this one is we're zooming in and we're going to learn something else. If we learned in the first one that God's intentional in creating order, what are we learning in this one? Well, let's look. This is the story that you're probably familiar with, where we learn about the snake and the garden and the tree in a garden. Let's look how it goes. First, God creates the earth, and in that, he creates kind of a threefold structure. He creates Eden, a garden in Eden, and in the middle, he plants a tree. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now let me show you one other trick that we do literarily. It's called a merism. A merism is a Hebrew technique to show 2 ends of a bookend that show everything in between. A merism shows 2 ends. So you'll say heavens and earth, the knowledge of good and evil. And really what it's telling you is not just those 2 ends, but it means everything. It means everything in between those 2 ends. So it's kind of like the knowledge of good and bad, the knowledge of everything. He created the heavens and the earth and everything in between. So when we look at the structure of Eden, where we go from Eden to a garden to a tree, and he created a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's kind of the key highlight of this point. In fact, it's right in the center of the garden. So we should be like, I wonder what this tree is about. It's not hidden over in the corner. It's the purpose of the story. So we meet Adam, and he's put in the garden with this tree right in the middle. So the tension builds. What's going to happen with the tree? Now, this is where we learn about God being slightly different than we did in the first version. In the first version, God's distant. He's just creating things. He's saying them. But now he's there. He's with them. And it says that he forms Adam from the dust of the earth. And you get the idea of a potter creating clay. God is creating Adam, and he's right there with him. Later, after Adam and Eve are created, he is walking and talking to them. It even says that God is walking in the cool parts of the day. God is there with his creation. He's not a distant God. He's right there. And they are his image bearers. They are the culmination of his creation. They are the point, and he is going to work with them. What do we see? It's our origin. It's our creation. God wants to tell us how important we are to him. But what about that tree? Yeah, there's a tree in the middle, and that's the story of our decisions. Right in the middle of our creation, we have a choice to make. Will we choose good or will we choose evil? We have agency. That agency gives us an ability to choose in our lives. So while this is a story of Adam and Eve and all creation, it's also our story. It's the story of what are we going to do when we are plunked down on this earth? Will we choose good or evil? Will we follow God? What will we do with our agency? This creation is our creation. The story of Adam and Eve is our story and what we're going to do about it. So, God creates humanity. We're the culmination of everything. In the middle, we have a choice to make. Will we choose good or will we choose evil? And He's there with us all along. And that's the story of Genesis. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to watch more videos on Patheos, go ahead and subscribe to the whole channel.